This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just beginning on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because FanDuel is your home for NBA live betting. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. 21 plus and present in Virginia. First online, real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Taxes was taxing. Now taxes is relaxing when you file for free.
I can file for free? TurboTax Free Edition. Roughly 37% of filers qualify. Simple Form 1040 returns only. See if you qualify at turbotax.com/free. I can file for free.
Now this is taxes. File for free with TurboTax Free Edition and get your maximum refund. No schedules except for Earned Income Tax Credit, Child Tax Credit, and Student Loan Interest. See if you qualify at turbotax.com/free.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. I'm Stephen Topless. Don't forget to listen to our 1994-95 season review when we look back on that brilliant season for Frank Clark's Forest side. Part 1 is out now and it's in your podcast feed, so do have a listen back to that one.
Hello and welcome to the 1865 Match Report with me, Rich Ferraro, and this is a report the day after, the morning after, Forest went away to Fulham and lost 2-1 to the Cottagers. It was a match which, in truth, Forest were probably second best. Emile Smith Rowe gave the home team the lead after 15 minutes after great work by Adama Traore, and Chris Wood then created a goal out of pretty much nothing on 37 minutes before Calvin Bassey got the decisive strike from a corner in the second half. Now, George Edwards, you were there. We're having a chat again for the second time in a week after a match that didn't really go the way that we hoped it would. How was that game for you?
Yeah, not the greatest. I don't think Forest were really anywhere near the level it takes to win a Premier League match, particularly when you're playing a team like Fulham at home, who have had such success this season. I think a lot of the defeats this season have been quite resounding, and I've mentioned that a lot. You think of Man City, Newcastle, Arsenal, where Forest have shipped loads of goals, and the two tight defeats have both now been to Fulham. But if you look at that game, I don't think it was a very narrow defeat. I think Forest have got Matz Sels to thank for the fact that the score wasn't above 3. And I've got Chris Wood to thank for a moment of brilliance. Obviously, there's a deflection that helps him, but the fact that he's got the ability to make something out of nothing gives Forest a bit of credibility on the scoreline that maybe they didn't deserve. 2 shots on target, and Sels made 8 saves. So I think that pretty much sums up the game. They were just nowhere near Fulham, to be fair. Fulham were stronger than them, quicker than them, better than them in every aspect of the pitch. And I think Marco Silva said at Match of the Day, if the result hadn't been a Fulham win, it'd have been completely unjust. So there's no complaints about the scoreline, and Forest have now got to just react, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you took the words out of my mouth in the sense of Forest didn't create enough. They had Sels to thank for keeping the scoreline down. I think it's also one of those, Fulham were very clearly the best team, I think, both in terms of performance level and tactics, and we'll talk about that as we go through. Let's just go through the starting lineup for Forest. So it's Sels in goal. As against Brighton, it was a back three of Morato and Murillo, either side of Nikola Milenkovic. Ola Aina and Nico Williams at wing-back, with Danilo and Elliot Anderson making up the central midfield positions, with Morgan Gibbs-White just ahead of them, and then Chris Wood accompanied by Anthony Elanga up front. So before we go any further, I mean, were you surprised at Nuno still deploying the back three? Do you think that was just because it worked well against Brighton? What were your thoughts, and what do you think Nuno's thought processes were?
No, it wasn't an overwhelming surprise for me. I think this season he has gone for personnel over formation. I don't think he really has that much of a preference for formation. I think he just trusts the players that are fit. You remember the Everton game that we went away from home. He deployed a back three, so you're thinking, is that to complement, sort of to deal with Everton's aerial threat? Murillo gets injured in the warm-up, so you'd think Willy Bolly might come in, but no, he puts Sousa in, goes to a back four because he trusts Sousa. So I think it's more about personnel, and the fact that the team performed so well at home to Brighton, it wasn't a surprise. And I think the fact that Morato didn't play at Exeter gave an indication that Nuno would stick with that back three. The one surprise for me maybe was Danilo. I thought because he played an hour at Exeter and because he's only coming back into it, an away game might suit someone like Dominguez or Yates a bit more. So that was the only surprise I really had. But no, I thought Nuno probably, to be fair, approached it in the right way. I think you've got to have continuity from winning a game like 7-0, and unfortunately, Forest went at the level. But from the start, with Hudson-Odoi not fit to probably start the game especially, I think he did the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a slightly different take on that one. So my thoughts were that, and as people who follow us on social media will see, that we post team predictions before every game using FanHub's team predictor. And in that one, I went for the back three because I thought, well, Fulham have got a real attacking prowess. They play kind of a sort of a front four with two wingers, and then in this case, Smith Rowe was behind Jimenez. And I just thought that particularly as Jimenez is kind of good in the air, but also really good on the floor, that with the marauding kind of sort of attacking players behind, that's why they might go for that back three. I also suspect that they knew that it would be difficult to keep crosses out when you got Iwobi on one side and Adama Traore on the other. So maybe they wanted the extra bodies in the box. And of course, both Morato and Milenkovic being tall and Murillo having improved his aerial presence quite considerably, I thought that might have been part of the thinking. We'll come back to that sort of team selection element and what Nuno's thinking was in a little while. Forest made a relatively bright start in the sense of making a couple of chances, half chances maybe. So Nico Williams, most notably, cut inside, snatched his shot a little bit, so it went the wrong side of the near post. I don't necessarily think that was the best option that Nico went for there. You're shaking your head there, George. But then after that, really, Fulham took control, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. And I saw Nuno say that he thought Forest started the game well. I wasn't overly pleased by it. I mean, we did get forward a few times, but I thought every attack looked a bit stretched. It looked like we were stretching or we were one touch away from losing the ball. And even that attack, I think there's a few loose touches. Forest just about win possession, and then you could get space and finds the shot. So, yeah, I don't really think Forest started the game that well. I just don't think Fulham started well. And once they clicked into gear, as they did, Forest had no sort of way to deal with it. Out wide, as you mentioned, Forest really didn't deal with it very well. I thought Aina did a reasonably good job with Iwobi, and because they had, I think, those wingers to contend with, we offered nothing down the wings. Nico was okay going forward, particularly first half a lot better, but you didn't really, you think you saw a couple in the second half, but you didn't really see it Aina sort of overlapping down the right as he often does from fullback, because he probably had Iwobi to deal with, and he did very well on that side. But yeah, I think Nico struggled all game to deal with Adama Traore with his pace. And Traore was just on it, to be fair. You've got to give it to Fulham. They had a completely on day and Forest didn't. Traore was taking on Nico, getting past him every time. And then Murillo won the ball at one point, charged forward as he does over the halfway line. And it was Adama Traore who ran back from behind in his own half, sprinted, won the ball back off Murillo, and then brought Fulham forward. So I think Fulham were just at it yesterday. And as you mentioned, they grew into the game. They started putting balls in from wide areas. And with the fact Forest kept letting them do that, one of them was going to eventually go in the back of the net.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, isn't it? So, I mean, Traore, he's a bit of a freak of nature, isn't he? He's built like a weightlifter, but runs like a sprinter. And he's so strong and powerful. And yeah, I mean, I would defy any fullback to have been able to handle him on the form he was in yesterday. He's the classic mercurial winger, isn't he, Traore? He's either brilliant or he's kind of you kind of wonder what he's on the pitch for if he's really a footballer. He always seems to
be brilliant against us, doesn't he?
Well, I mean, we say that about a lot of players, don't we?
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I think really there's two moments that really showed that he was on his game. That one that you mentioned, where he came back and he defended from one of Murillo's marauding runs, and you just got the sense that Murillo's about to look up and try and pull the trigger from 40 yards again, didn't you? But he just got outrun quite not even in a difficult way. It's just that Traore's pace when he gets going is just incredible. And then at the other end, Traore did one of those things that you love to see when it's your winger doing it, which is he put the ball around Nico one side, sprinted round him the other, and absolutely had him on toast. So there's not a great deal you can do with that. Having said that, one of the things that you can do as a fullback in those situations is improve how tight you get to your winger. And there, I think that maybe the formation played against us slightly, because when we're playing the 4-2-3-1, Anderson tends to drop into the left-back position, and whoever's on the other side, whether it be Danilo, Yates, Dominguez, tend to drop in to assist the right-back. And maybe to do with the formation, that wasn't quite happening in the same way. So it seemed to be Williams and Murillo, but Murillo was caught between defending the centre of the box and helping out his fullback there. So let's talk about that first goal. And I think from a defensive point of view, it is one that's it's disappointing to concede. But if you're Fulham, you're going to be delighted with it, because they had some nice passing. They got it out to Traore, who cut inside, and it was an absolute peach of a cross. But should a player who's not that tall like Emile Smith Rowe really be getting a header in our box?
Yeah, definitely not. That's the thing about Traore as well. He showed that he could go both ways, and for that to be a cross with your weak foot is something special. And it was pinpoint for Smith Rowe. And yeah, I think Forest were more focused on Jimenez in the box, who obviously you mentioned was the main aerial threat. I think Traore made a chance for him a few minutes earlier, the one you mentioned where he skipped past Williams, put it in, and Sels made a decent save straight at him. But Jimenez had a clear header there, so that's a warning sign, and Forest dealt with Jimenez there, but then couldn't deal with someone else coming into the box. I think Morato maybe could have been a bit tighter to him, and it was just a good run to the back post. He saw that he was unaware, that the players were unaware, and carried on the run. And I think on the fullback issue, Anderson was sort of trying to do that because that's his normal role, but he was wary of the fact that inside him there wasn't the cover maybe that there normally is. So I think there was all a bit of confusion. I just think the squad at the minute suits being in a back four. I think that's how we've played through that very good run over Christmas, and that's how a lot of the lads have got used to playing. So with the injury, it's not been possible. But I think with Cal coming back, the back three will go back to being plan B, I'm pretty sure. And I think that is something that suits a lot of the players. They know their position, they know when to cover, when to support. And Nico can't do it on his own. He's done very well defensively this season, kept Mo Salah quiet at the City grounds. But when you have a player like Adama Traore, you've got to have support. And unfortunately, Anderson and Morello were both in two minds. And I don't blame them, because it's a bit of difference. But Forest just couldn't deal with it. And Fulham did deserve to take the lead at that point in the game. Yeah,
and they could have increased the lead, because there was another cross by Traore, which Jimenez got a head to. Relatively easy save for Sels, that one. But then Jimenez also had a volley from 20 yards, which was an absolute perler, and it was a great save from Sels, that one. I mean, I would go so far as to say that, he's not up there in the goal-scoring charts necessarily, because you've got the likes of Salah and Haaland and Chris Wood, obviously, up there. But I do think that Jimenez is probably, in my mind, the best all-round number 9 in the league this season.
Yeah, he's been really strong, hasn't he? And I think it's nice to see him be brought out the best of him in Marco Silva, because he had that concussion at Wolves, and we didn't really know if we'd see the best of him. But yeah, I think he works so well with somebody like Traore. They had such chemistry at Wolves together, didn't they? They complement each other's games so well. And yeah, I think on the ball is as good as anyone on the league. And then in finishing areas, I think Fulham don't create a lot of chances, very similar to Forest. He's got a very good conversion rate. And, when you give him chances like that, he's going to score one. Obviously didn't score yesterday. But yeah, he's a real threat, and you can't give him space to do things like that. And we had Sels to thank for us that it wasn't 2-0 at that point.
Yeah, and of course, when Nuno was manager at Wolves, Jimenez was sometimes partnered with Traore as a centre-forward, and sometimes with Diego Jota when Jota was still a winger. And Forest were trying that. They did it quite effectively against Brighton, tried it today. Against Brighton, I think the fact that their centre-halves were Van Hecker and Dunk, neither of whom are blessed with pace, and so that made a real difference. Whereas today they got two athletic centre-backs in Bassey and Anderson, both of whom could keep up. So even when the ball did go forward, it was struggling to stick, and Delanga was pretty much anonymous. But literally, as I said to the good lady wife, we just haven't got Morgan Gibbs-White into the game. Morgan did catch a loose ball, did a 1-2 with Danilo, played it forward to the Wood, who was rushing between Bassey and Anthony Robinson. It's actually hit Wood on the heel, but then he gathered it first, and in doing so, and making a turn, he sold Bassey, and then, Robinson, frankly, was made a fool of because he ended up sliding halfway across the box. It was like watching a game of sensible soccer or something like that. And then Wood very calmly did shoot into the bottom corner with slight aid of a deflection off Bassey. It's quite likely that Leno would have saved it if it hadn't been for the deflection, but nonetheless, the composure and confidence from Wood basically got Forest a goal out of nothing, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the one weakness of Fulham early on, because their defenders, as you mentioned, they're athletic and they like to be expressive, but you often saw one of them come out wide or be aggressive and be out of position. So obviously Anderson isn't there, because when Bassey and Anderson were there, Wood didn't have a chance at all. I think he was just dominated. I would also point out that I think Chris Wood is treated very differently to other Premier League strikers by referees. I don't think he's a climbing frame, but they often let him be that. But I'll leave that point there. But yeah, I think the confidence from Forest as well, to have somebody as informed like Wood up there. It's not the best ball from Morgan, but they know Wood can make things happen. That's why, if he's in a position where he might lose the ball, he just flings it up there, confident Wood can do something. And yeah, he does so well, obviously. It's Wood's ability to be in those areas, to make things happen out of completely nothing and to take his chances when he gets them. I think that's now 18 goals from 28 shots on target this season. And you wouldn't say a lot of them are easy chances. Think of that Chelsea goal that he scores, the headers. There's some incredible finishes there. He doesn't just score tap-ins. Very rarely does he, actually. And that was just postage stamp. Obviously, we didn't know it had a deflection, but it was an awesome finish. And he gave Forest a chance in the game, gave Forest a lifeline, because they didn't look like creating anything after that Nico chance. And, you know, it gave them a platform and a chance to improve their play, to get a bit of confidence in the game. Unfortunately, they couldn't do so. I think, as you mentioned, Elanga struggled because he wasn't out wide. He was sort of having to try and create from the middle. And when, you know, Brighton's midfield was shocking. Fulham's midfield was awesome yesterday, and Elanga didn't have space to work closely with Gibbs-White to create things happen. And then because he didn't have a fullback out wide with him to go down the line and to support him, he really struggled to have any sort of involvement in the game.
We'll talk about the second half and indeed the post-match comments in just a minute.
The 1865 Match Report.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Welcome back to the 1865 Match Report with me, Rich Ferraro, and him, George Edwards. And George, we've already discussed how Forest weren't really at the races. But having said that, that goal did give a little bit of hope, and it did even things out ever so slightly in terms of, I think Fulham weren't necessarily at their best after the goal. But to be honest, once they took the lead in the 62nd minute, to me, the result wasn't ever really in doubt. And it's a bit disappointing, again, maybe the manner in which we conceded.
Yeah, you never like to concede set-piece goals, do you? But as we mentioned, Bassey and Anderson were dominant all day. Forest didn't win anything in the air, much like at Exeter. You know, there's actually worrying parallels between this game and the Exeter game, which I'm not going to dwell on too much because it's only 2 games. But very similarities in the fact that Forest didn't win anything aerially. Chris Wood, bless him, as I mentioned, was fighting a losing battle up top. But then at the back, Forest were poor. I thought Morato in the air was pretty poor. Murillo did all right in the air, to be fair to him. And Milenkovic was okay. But yeah, aerially, we were just shocking. I think Fulham have got some tall players. You know, you've got Berger in midfield, Jimenez up front. The two, especially Iwobi's quite a tall throw winger, and then their 2 centre-backs. We just couldn't live with it, to be fair. And Sels couldn't stop everything. It's a good header from Bassey. And yeah, from then, as you mentioned, I think maybe apart from Man City, it's the first time I've been confident Forest won't score. They just sort of were breaking with tedium and a lack of creativity. Hudson-Odoi, once he comes on, has a chance. He sort of is in 2 minds and hits it straight at the goalkeeper from a good position. Apart from that, we got nowhere near the goal, and it was a very dull, lacklustre performance from Forest after the goal. And one thing I would say is that from losing positions this season, we have struggled to impact games with substitutions. Obviously, Hudson-Odoi comes off the bench and improved Forest undoubtedly, but he would ordinarily be starting. And you look at Forest trying to get a goal. You know, if they want to see a game out, they bring Morato on, they bring Yates or Dominguez on. They can take Wood off and give Taiwo a run or something. But if they're trying to get a goal, it's been very difficult this season to have people to rely on, because they've got a very distinct best 11 at the minute if everybody's fit. But apart from that, you struggle to see who Nuno trusts to come on and make a good difference. I'd maybe like to see Sousa get some more minutes, but he hasn't been trusted enough to do that in the Premier League. And if you've got Hudson-Odoi and Elanga on the pitch already, they're undoubtedly more quality players who know the Premier League a lot better. You've got to leave them on there. We've not got a striker as informed as Chris Wood to bring on off the bench. There's nobody like Morgan Gibbs-White on the bench. Maybe Danilo, if he's on the bench, can come on and bring some expression. But apart from that, you struggle very much to see Forest scoring goals off the bench. And I think that's why so much of their success this season comes from finding a way to get leads and hold on to them, because chasing leads this season, they haven't looked amazing. And it's hard to have criticisms of Forest this season because of their success and because of the surprise of it. But I think you would say that because after Fulham scored that goal, there was no real, I think, threat from Forest.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot to be said there. The first goal is always so important in Forest games, and even against Exeter, that was proven to be the case. And just to talk about those substitutions, I mean, one thing that's a case in point is that, well, you know what? Forest only made 3 subs. So that maybe suggests that there's a lack of trust in the ability of those on the bench to come in and turn the game around, as opposed to seeing out a result. So the first one was the pre-planned one, which happened just after Bassey scored. So more or less just after the hour, with Danilo coming off and Sangare coming on. Then 5 minutes later, we saw the change we kind of expected, which was Hudson-Odoi coming on for Morato, kind of a reverse of the substitution we do when we're trying to see a game out, where we'd usually bring off a winger and put on the extra defender. And then in the last 5 minutes of normal time, Jota came on for Anderson so that Gibbs-White could drop a bit deeper, and Jota played as the number 10. But, it's all a bit academic, really. Let's just also quickly run through some of the other chances that were there. So I think there were a couple for Traore, including one which brought a good save from Sels, where Traore came onto a volley at the back post, and I thought that was going in, to be honest. I also think that there was also a couple of other good chances. For example, after Willian and Andreas Pereira had come on, they were showboating a little bit, but it led to a double shot, which meant that Pereira had one saved. And then I think it was it Harrison Reed who came onto the second one, which was blocked again. But before that, for me, the best save that Sels made was one where Iwobi was jiggling in and out, showing Ola Aina inside and outside. Then he played the ball across to the edge of the box. Sasa Lukic came in. He tried to set himself up on his right foot, couldn't find that, turned back onto his left and put a shot into towards the bottom corner. And to me, that was the save of the match, because the way that Sels got down to it and actually adjusted his body shape and body positioning in order to be able to push out wide meant that, for me, that was the save of the second half. Let's just talk about the only save that Leno had to make, which was pretty routine, which was the one time that Aina got forward. He never quite had the ball under control, it seemed, because he was trying to get past his men on the right-hand side, but then he cut inside, played actually a very nice pass out to Hudson-Odoi in his favoured position, corner of the box. He came inside slightly, then cut inside onto his right foot, before basically planting a shot which was way too close to Leno, and he never really had the angle to try and curl that inside the far stick like he likes to. So that was more or less all that Forest could muster, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think he has to just, I know that's not his game, but he has to hit it with his left foot and go high near post with that, because Leno was always going to gobble that up. And the comfortableness of the save, I think, shows how comfortable Fulham were in the game. They didn't allow Forest to create any of their counter-attacking chances. And you think of how Forest score goals, there was no real chance in that sense. That's the only real sort of space Forest found out wide. And Hudson-Odoi obviously couldn't do it. And you mentioned those sort of barrage of chances towards the end that Sels keeps out. It almost felt like Fulham had an extra man at that point, because they were just waltzing past Forest through the midfield, through the defence. And there was just a sense of inevitability about the fact that, they're going to score. I think a few times I was like nodding my head going, yeah, that's going to go in, that's going to go in. But Matz Sels, we need to talk about him, because, wow, he's exceptional. And I think I've always said it's been Milenkovic this season, but he's very slowly becoming our player of the season, because time and time again, he steps up, he excels, he saves us, and it's in vain today, and I get that. But you look at last season and Matt Turner stuck out as by far Forest's worst player for making mistakes week in, week out. Well, every week we have something new to say about Sels. Some exceptional saves. I think is on the ball. He doesn't try and miss something he's not. He just gets rid. and his clearances almost always stay in play. He's made, I think, the second most saves in the Premier League as well. So it's not like he's been lucky and marshalled by his defence. And you've got to credit his character as well. You know, Forest signed him as a rushed through, almost deadline day signing. He'd failed in the Premier League at Newcastle, and he was comfortable in Liga. He was Strasbourg captain, probably had a decent life there and could have stayed. But he took a risk. He wanted to make it back at the Premier League in the world's best league. And you know, he's been a complete revelation. And every time he steps on the pitch, I just can't wait to watch him perform.
Absolutely. And he's one of those that kind of adds to the catalogue of kind of great but not high-profile signings, along with Ola Aina for free and, Sels was £5 million. So just let's go to the managers. You mentioned about Marco Silva, how he got that absolutely right. And he did say that we knew that they would play with three at the back and with three midfielders, and therefore we knew the spaces were going to be out wide, and that's what he set them up to do, and they did it really well. He also said we knew that they have big boys there with three at the back, but if you do the right move in the right movement and the ball comes quick, it's a really difficult spot to defend, and we exploited it. Hey, you know what, Marco, you said it. I have to say, when Marco Silva first started off in the English game as a manager, I thought he's a little bit of a confidence trickster. I thought there's a lot of bluster and not many results, but obviously he had a bit of an up and down time, leaving Watford, his time at Everton and everything. But since he's come to Fulham, you know what, he's really been the real deal, and he's definitely one of the best managers in the Premier League, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Watford and Everton are both very toxic clubs to work at, and I think he was fighting a losing battle at Hull when he first came into the Premier League, and he undoubtedly improved them. But yeah, since he's been at Fulham, he's been a breath of fresh air, to be fair. You look at the way they... Well,
No, I was also going to say that I think that, Hull, Watford, Fulham, Everton, sorry. I think also he's learnt a lot of lessons. You know, we all gain with age and wisdom, or we try to anyway. And I think that's worked well.
I think he really, a lot of that game comes down to him. He knew what Forest were expecting. And I think had Forest gone into it with a back four and really matched up with Fulham, I think they've had a lot more of a chance because they're confident in their ability to take on any Premier League team. But they had a clear strategy they let Morato had so much time on the ball because they weren't confident in his ability, particularly on that right side where it's not his most favourable. And then as soon as Forest changed it to the left to Murillo, they pressed him. They didn't let Murillo have a second on the ball. And that was really... that's often Forest's only sort of outlet from defence into midfield, apart from going long. So, yeah, it was a really good setup with Marco Silva, and I think he, more than anybody on the pitch, won Fulham that game.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think that with regard to the way that Fulham set up and the way that Forest set up as well, think back to that game at the City Ground. It was very even. It was decided on the tail of two penalties. It was a 0-0 match, really, wasn't it? But this time, I think that back three and Silva anticipating it really made quite a lot of difference. With Forest, Nuno admitted... there are many things I would do differently now, changing to the back four. It gave us more width, more things that we're used to. But obviously we couldn't create the chances. I mean, really, it's all a tale of saying that actually everything kind of went wrong from the first minute, from the moment the team sheet was announced, from the setup of the team to the performance to the chances we conceded and the ones that we didn't create. And I'm just going to, as we sort of finish off, think about the fact that I actually had this and Newcastle down as probably two of our hardest games remaining this season because they're away against teams who are doing well. Obviously, Newcastle are blowing a little bit hot and cold at the moment. But, you and a few of the others are taking part in the Forest Podcast Prediction League. And you all said this is one of the toughest, you anticipated it being the toughest game left this season. And so it proved.
Yeah, yes, it did. I think Nuno, maybe I'm very hesitant to criticise him because we wouldn't be third in the league without him. But, if he thinks that, maybe he could have changed it sooner, maybe at half-time, because Sousa has proved in the Premier League, like I mentioned, the Everton game, that he can start a game, he can allow teams to get a foothold, he can support the fullback, and I think that was an evident issue with the width. I thought maybe he could have changed it after half an hour, certainly at half-time, rather than waiting until Forest conceded the third goal and 5 minutes later, because after that, Fulham it was exactly where they wanted, and it was, like you mentioned, very hard to create chances. Undoubtedly including this one, the next four were going to be tough for Forest. I think it does on paper get easier for us afterwards. And obviously the expectation has changed now. These games are going to define our season. They're going to define whether we achieve our Champions League dream, or whether it's Europa or Conference League, or whether we drop out, just because of the fact that you're playing teams around you. I think Fulham maybe are the lowest down team, they're the team you can afford to lose to. Equally, I think probably Fulham's the most tough game. I think Newcastle actually going away to Newcastle is a slightly easier game, because Forest actually have the confidence. They've been there before and won. So that will play into the fact of that, as well as I think Newcastle style maybe suits Forest better. And they're going to have Hudson-Odoi, I'd suggest, fit to start, which gives them a foothold far better in a game. And then they'll always fancy their chances against whoever in the league. They've got Man City and Arsenal to come. I think they'll be confident that they can get points at home against those two. So I think Fulham was actually the toughest game. The fact it's 2-1, Forest have got to react from it. It's now 3 games in 90 minutes. They haven't won away from home, and that was always seen as Forest's strength this season. So it's all about the reaction. I've got complete confidence that Forest can react, because we've done that so well this season. We haven't let defeats live on our mind too much. So I think the quicker they can get this out of their mind, get to training on Monday and focus on Newcastle, the better. And it wouldn't surprise me if Forest reacted with a win at St James's Park next weekend. I just want to make a final point, and it's the fact that, you look at the teams that were promoted in Forest's season of promotion, and Fulham, Bournemouth and Forest on paper are doing the best out of them. But when you've got a bogey team, it just lives forever, doesn't it? Against those teams, since we've been promoted, we've now had 12 games. We've lost 8, drew 3, and only won 1, which was that Fulham game last season under the City Ground lights. And, when is it going to end?
That's a rather depressing point to end on, but I thought you were going to say that, isn't it amazing how all 3 of the promoted teams from a couple of years ago are doing really well now that they've settled into the Premier League? So let's leave it on that, and a slightly happier situation to leave things. And we will be back in the week. So we'll have a women's show this week. We'll have our Friday 5, and then we will be going away to St James's Park. So I want to say thank you very much to you, George Edwards, and also to you, listener, for joining us. Things will get better. It's only 6 losses in the entire season. We've still got a cushion back to 4th spot. So let's try and stay positive, and come on, you Reds.
Podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.